internazionale di Sperlonga 2016, la ultima demo, un altro grandissimo maestro internazionale, Laurin McCracken dagli Stati Uniti. The last but not the least, nostro grande privilegio di avere oggi questa sua dimostrazione del lavoro che fa, perché è veramente rarissimo. Laurin è un iperrealista, come vedete, è anche interessante quello che avete visto stamattina con Thomas Schaller, che è una persona che interpreta e quindi usa l'emozione, usa il colore e l'acquarello in un modo diverso da quello che fa Laurin, che invece interpreta e raffigura la realtà in maniera ultra fotografica. Adesso lui ovviamente capite che un lavoro come questo che vedete qui alle nostre spalle, che è uno di quelli in mostra, impiega circa 200-250 ore per costruirlo, quindi non è possibile avere una dimostrazione realistica, e lui ci ha portato una presentazione del lavoro che fa in dettaglio. Thank you, Laurin, it's a great honor for us. È la prima volta che fa una dimostrazione, una spiegazione del genere in Italia. Thank you a lot.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be asked by Anna and Annalisa to be in this fabulous exhibition with some of my friends and some of my new friends. The great thing about it is that I have been introduced to wonderful Teresa and people like that I didn't know their work, and we all expand our own art by observing other people's art, and so it's just a great joy to be here in the time we have today together. I would like to show you a few photographs of how I got into painting and the process over the years of how I transitioned from one central subject to another subject. What I'd like to do is take this painting, which took 100 hours to paint. The screen show you step by step all the key techniques that went into creating this. Since my paintings take anywhere from 30 hours to 120 hours, it's very difficult for me to do a painting demo. You would be sound asleep. Well, this year I will be 74 years old, and I took my first watercolor lesson when I turned 60. I am an architect, and everybody says, oh, that explains it. But I was the marketing guy. I haven't had a drawing board in more than 40 years. It was about, let's put it this way, I love watercolor because it's technically driven. It has all these pieces that have to be put together at the right time. Watercolor is a fabulous medium because with the same brushes, the same paper, and the same paint, we can create a whole universe of difference. Daniel Smith paint. I also use Escoda brushes. I also use Fabriano paper. my key concern was learning the craft. How does watercolor really want to work? So if you're going to be a writer, they tell you write what you know. So I grew up in the southern United States, and I knew flowers. So I started painting flowers. Since it takes me a long time to do a painting, I work on photographs. Composing in the camera. I've been a photographer since I was a kid. And when I first started painting, I knew a lot about art. I have a big education in art history, but I didn't realize that I would be a realist painter. And I was talking to the editor of a magazine in the United States, and I was telling him that I was getting more realistic and more realistic and more realistic, and he said, it's because you've been to all the great museums of the world, and that's what you related to. Learning how to do wet into wet, wet into dry, the two-brush technique, all of those things, trying just to perfect a craft daily. And about this time, I want to know, is this a good painting? And I have nobody to talk to. So I enter it in a competition. This was a long time before I met the wonderful Tom Schellers and other people in the world. So I'm just painting alone. I think they're good, but are they good? I start painting these other flowers. So anyway, I would paint other flowers, blue flowers and other flowers, and I would submit them with this. And the yellow flower always gets in the show. But ask the juror, why? And he said, I'd see all of these washed out watercolors, and then all was yours. Bam! It's in the show. My advice to you is paint yellow flowers. I realized that everybody painted flowers. You know, that millions of watercolors painted flowers. So if I was going to separate myself from the millions, I had to find something that was personal for me. I started to think about all those museums that I visited all over the world. And the paintings that I remembered most distinctly were the still lifes of the Dutch and the Flemish painters of the 16th and 17th century. If you ask the church would tell you this is all about symbolism, right? They're just painting what's around them. They're telling the story of what is on the tables at the time. You can trace through the still life paintings of the Dutch the 75 years of growth of them being from very poor country to a very rich country just by looking what's on the table. Peel coming down like this is about eternity. The lemon is a symbol of this painter, Willem Heda, understands perspective so well that he can do a spiral and you know exactly what it is. The same thing with the knife. There's almost a knife in every one. That I understand perspective, so I can do a foreshortened knife coming out at you and you understand perfectly what I'm painting. This is my hero, William Koff, because he painted these wonderful black backgrounds. I would do silver and crystal and glass and these things. So I looked for books on how to paint all of these things. There were no books. But I did find in one book that it said, if you're going to paint something that's very complex, paint it 10 centimeters at a time. Then the next challenge was, what color is crystal? Fundamentally, a huge range of grays, from very, very light gray to black. So I tested all the ways to make gray in watercolor, and this was my test painting to see if I had achieved it.
Wow.
That was my first silver and crystal. I wish I had the photograph here, because you can't, even though I take very detailed photographs and I make a lot of them, I'm not a slave to the photograph. This little ginger jar in the photograph was much smaller, but it didn't make a good composition.
Qualcosa di vivo, C'è sempre il fiore, la frutta.
There's always something living.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And that's from the Dutch. There's always something, some fruit or something. And just like the Dutch, over the period that the Dutch became very wealthy, they have more things and more elaborate things and things that are more expensive on the table. So I'm trying to emulate what they're doing. This is jade from China, and I'm showing that the Dutch sailed off while Christopher Columbus was going west trying to find China. The Dutch went around Africa and got there first. I have friends in Mississippi that are old families, and so this silver and this crystal came, this is Austrian, from 150 years ago. These are antiques. So the issue became, how do you bring this ancient approach to painting into modern times? So one day I'm coming back from the store and I have pears and aluminum foil, and I'm thinking, silver and crystal, aluminum, modern, maybe. And I'm thinking, how more difficult can it be? It's the same grays, right? Things repeat. There are patterns. And then a friend of mine said, it must be, they said, maybe it's impossible to paint clear glass. And I said, I'm always up for a challenge. This is the kind of glassware that I grew up with a child. And my grandmother would have this. So I call this my grandmother's closet. And then every now and then, you just see something. You didn't plan it or anything, but you just see something that speaks, I want to be a painting. I was staying at a bed and breakfast, and I walked in, and the sun was coming on the breakfast table, and I said, that needs to be a painting. This is in Amsterdam. This is just outside of the Bahnhof, where you store your bicycles. We had been over in Aachen to see a William Koff show, and we came back in the late afternoon. And this is one of those things that it just spoke out. It said, take a photograph. I just took one photograph, and it said, I want to be a painter. Can you do it? Can you do it?
Per esempio era questa una di quelle scene dove l'ha visto,
Almost 400 hours for the drawing and the painting. Because the challenge was, how do you paint? You can't paint in between, right? So how to paint that as a painting? So what I did is I took a very fine pen and put masking fluid in it, and I drew all 573 spokes. And that allowed me to paint this as a painting, and that as a painting. When I finished all of the wheels, I took the masking fluid back off, exposed the paper. It was horrible. It was too white. The spokes aren't white. So then I had to take my pen again with the different grays and redid them, repaint them.